Okay, guys, time for another video game video. I don't know if I'm going to make this totally about Jimmys and Timmys and that kind of stuff that I usually do, but I'm going to tell you why that. What if I told you, I'm like going to blow your boner up here for a second, dude. What if I told you I actually don't think Guilty Gear is even that complicated of a game? Mind blowing, right? So this is again against the people like, oh, you need to dumb down Guilty Gear. Well, what if I told you Guilty Gear actually already is a dumbed down fighting game when it first came out. Well, let's take away the first Guilty Gear because the first Guilty Gear had fucking you could taunt or respect in the air to cross your guy up and all this other kind of weird shit, right? But let's talk about what the general idea of Guilty Gear is because the general idea of when Guilty Gear was first made, X, we should say probably, it was made with a lot of goodwill. The very first Guilty Gears were made with a lot of goodwill. And there were a lot of dumb reaches given to the player to actually make it easy. So if we were to compare the original, again, quotation marks, idea of what makes Guilty Gear, compared to a game like, say, Street Fighter before it, right? Because ultimately, every fighting game will always be compared to Street Fighter because even if it is not the best fighting game, it is the most important fighting game ever, okay? So, as much as people talk about wanting Guilty Gear to be dumbed down, I'm going to tell you why Guilty Gear, in many ways, actually is a dumbed down fighting game, okay? Roll with me here. And again, I like Guilty Gear, okay? Or I like the old ones, right? I don't really care about XR, which I'll get into later, but so let's think about compared to Street Fighter, so. Well, compared to Street Fighter, 6 buttons, every attack has a close-up normal. You have different jumping. Your neutral jump is a different attack compared to your diagonal jump attack. And these are all very fucking important, dude. They don't even have different neutral jumping attacks in Street Fighter anymore. But again, Street Fighter is absolute garbage. You know what I mean? The way they design it with a lot of things now. But again, comparing Guilty Gear to Street Fighter, Guilty Gear has less buttons than Street Fighter. It doesn't have close normals besides stand slash. It doesn't have all these different kinds of diagonal jumps and neutral jumps, which are very fucking important in old school Street Fighter, right? So again, we can say this is actually already dumbed down actually compared to Street Fighter. You don't need to learn as many moves, right? True? You know what I mean? And these moves are important in old Street Fighter. Close normal to current, you know what I mean? This is all important, right? You have the way that combos work in general. You chain combo in Guilty Gear. There are links in Guilty Gear, no doubt. You know what I mean? Kai's forward kick loop, whatever the fuck. Many links exist, but it's the emphasis on it is not as large as Street Fighter, right? And I think we can agree a link is more complicated than just tapping on your controller. It's easier, right? Think about dumb reach moves, which Guilty Gear has. Forward punch. Every character has a forward punch. Now, not every character's forward punch is equal, but forward punch is a move that was made with goodwill, if you will. I'm very clever with my English. A move that was made with goodwill to give your character a dumb reach anti-air so the player doesn't have to think about it too much. Certainly, Guilty Gear was still a game when it was made that there are still obscurities of moves. Moves can be a little bit more powerful than they might seem, which is fucking great, right? Being able to anti-air with a move that might not necessarily look like it might be an anti-air is fucking awesome, actually, right? Moves were not totally created with such a specific purpose back when Guilty Gear was first made, but a forward punch was, right? A forward punch is a dumb reach given to the player to not be complicated. Like, hey, you have all these other moves, you know what I mean? And I know most games, oh, maybe this character has his DP, whatever, but hey, everyone, we're giving you a forward punch. That's a dumbed down fighting game right there. Whether or not you want to believe it or not, that's a dumbed down fighting game, okay? That was given to the player to ease you into the game, right? Like, oh man, what do I do? Give us this move. What about backdashes? Backdashes is a dumb reach. And I'm not saying again it's there for goodwill. It's not a bad thing per se, but to call it something complicated and more than it is like stupid. A backdash is there to give the player a dumb reach as a reversal, right? So every character has a potential reversal. Correct? I don't think you can call a backdash a complicated mechanic that was added into the fighting. It's a mechanic added into the game with goodwill. I mean, yeah, you could probably put it compared to Street Fighter 2. It's like, oh hey, we got one more movement option than you Street Fighter. We have backdash. But is it complicated? No, it's a dumb reach. It's actually there to make the game easier for the player, right? Of course, we can make it complicated. We could like say from some perspective you have a different option. But again, at the end of the day, it's a dumb reach given to the player that dumbs down the game from a certain perspective, right? I'm actually for backdashes. I'm not saying I'm not saying I'm against forward punches, not saying I'm against backdashes, but I'm making an argument here, right? Let's look at the some people complain about Guilty Gear in the hurt boxes and hit boxes. Like that's a very common thing. I see people complain like, oh, the hurt boxes and hit boxes, we could definitely tone this down and this would make Guilty Gear less complicated. Well, let's look at Street Fighter. Again, you guys do realize that Street Fighter compared to Guilty Gear. Now, okay, there are extreme examples, but on a basic level, right? Look at blocking in Street Fighter compared to Guilty Gear. Now I know there's FDing and everything like that, but again, I'm making an argument here, and there's instant blocking, etc. But look at just blocking characters' hurt boxes when they block on a basic level. Street Fighter is vastly more complicated than Guilty Gear. It is. Look at characters like Balrog's block, DJ's block, right? Those are characters with extreme awkward blocking animations. Guile back in Street Fighter 2, the very, very first original, there's a ton of moves because of his block animation. He could not block them standing, even though they weren't technically low. Some of these moves still exist, even as far as Super Turbo. You know what I mean? Balrog can still be hit by certain things, but Balrog also can't be crossed up as easily. DJ has an awkward hitbox to like hurtbox to cross up. You know what I mean? Guy in Street Fighter Alpha 1 had an awkward hurtbox to cross up. Many cross ups didn't work on characters' quotation marks correctly, which added a form of depth. Not just a character being big or small. You know what I mean? Because Balrog and DJ, they don't look small. So why are they harder to cross up than Cammy, right? And there you go. Street Fighter actually has different kinds of blocks and everything like that. You know what I mean? And if we even get into the idea of just say cross ups, you know, in Guilty Gear, cross ups. Now I know in XR they added stuff like even Soul can cross up with his kick and everything like that. And it was Slash where Kai could first cross up with his jump slash. But even back in the day, and just say Guilty Gear X, Guilty Gear X did not have as many quotation marks or any cross up attacks as Street Fighter. The emphasis was not as big on that. Moves did not have that big of a hitbox to actually add that sort of cross up idea of Guilty, of like a fighting game, you could say, right? Now, of course, you could say maybe that's because you could backdash and all this other kind of crap, whatever. And again, the very first Guilty Gear had, I don't remember if it was you could respect or taunt while you were dashing to actually flip your character around. But again, we're going with the basic idea of this. Even something as simple as that, that emphasis doesn't really exist in Guilty Gear the same way as it does in Street Fighter. So can we say that's a more simple thing than in Guilty Gear? You don't have to be like, oh man, can this character like cross me up like this? No, the character in Guilty Gear, whoa, listen to my voice here. The player in Guilty Gear doesn't have to worry about that the same way in Street Fighter, right? It's simpler, right? Now again, of course, I know there's blocking, FD, instant block, etc. Right? And if we're talking about hurtbox and hitboxes, stuff like that exists in Street Fighter 2 back in the day. I know they're trying to get rid of all that stuff in Street Fighter. It's absolutely ridiculous. I believe it was Tekken vs Street Fighter where they first really started like characters could be so huge and tall, and their hurtboxes were not vastly different from a small character, and it's really fucking bizarre. And I know they're trying to standardize things, and it's fucking retarded. I mean, have you ever looked at the hurtboxes in Street Fighter 5? It's just like, dude, why are characters so fucking similar? It's fucking weird. But again, going off the idea of like when Guilty Gear was first becoming a game compared to the Street Fighter games in past, right? Characters in Street Fighter have different hitboxes too, right? Maybe they don't have a different weight, you know what I mean, like that. But then there you go. So you're like, wow, okay, that is actually something that is unique in Guilty Gear. We finally found something, right? We finally found something that is not on a base level that the player can just read about that is actually something different about Guilty Gear for the player to learn. Like obviously, oh, we could see there's backdashing, there's FD, and there's Instablock because it's in like, the data. But when you actually play and you see obscurities in a hurt box and weight, that's actually something that the player has to learn, right? And so many people are trying to take these things out of Guilty Gear, and you gotta realize, like, dude, these are some of the only things that are actually making Guilty Gear more complicated than Street Fighter on a basic level in some ways, right? Do you get what I'm getting at? People talk about different wake up times and everything like that. Street Fighter has sometimes potentially very big differences, right? Look at Dawson, and I've showed this before, and this happens, right? Look at Dawson compared to if you hit him backwards or standing or in front when you cross him up. I've made videos about this before, dude, right? Dawson gets up extremely different, dude. You can like go from crossing him up from way farther than you should be to you can't cross him up. Various differences like this actually exist in Street Fighter. I know maybe it's hard because the anime community, maybe when they were first getting a boner for Street or Guilty Gear, they want to say like, "Oh, look at all this stuff we can do, dude. Guilty Gear is so complicated." It's kind of funny, like so many people like Guilty Gear because they wanted it to be complicated, right? Because the nerds thought they found their math problem that we're better than Street Fighter. But then this goes into the subject psychologically I've talked about, where then the nerd realized that knowing a math problem doesn't make you good at a video game. And they realized that, oh, we're not good at Guilty Gear either, right? We learned all this frame data. Guilty Gear has all these complicated, maybe on some things in some ways, but we're still not good at the game. And then as games have progressed throughout the years, they have increasingly tried to make games a math problem, which is another thing. But again, what I'm trying to get at is Guilty Gear, on many ways, is actually not that complicated of a game. It's not that much more complicated than Street Fighter. It's actually a game that was given many dumb reaches to the player to help them ease into it, to help them ease into like, oh, hey, maybe there's a little bit of a different weight here. Do people think that ducking combos only exist in Guilty Gear? Like, look at Street Fighter. Super Turbo has some extreme ducking difference combos, right? Street Fighter has some differences between blocking and hit animations. Street Fighter, in some way, like this is something people get. Oh, you think Guilty Gear is complicated because you have counter hits and all this kind of stuff? What about something in Street Fighter, the idea of taking a hit to throw the guy? What about something like this? Think about this. This is a very people don't get that sometimes simple things are just like something being complicated can actually be complicated. A simple thing can actually be more complicated than a complicated thing, right? And I'm gonna give you an example. You're doing a fireball dragon punch trap, right, in a character, right? You're timing it in such a way that even though the character jumps over the fireball, to punish the fireball and not get hit by the DP, since there are no counter hits, you know what I mean? You can't land a jump in correctly because the opponent has spaced this too well. So if you jump in to punish the fireball, you have to do your attack early. Now, since you did your attack early, even though it's a counter hit, you know what I mean? Counter hits don't exactly exist in the game, right? So it's not like the move does more stun, so you don't actually get a combo. That is a very small difference between Street Fighter, right? You know what I mean? Back in the day in a Fireball Dragon Punch, right? Like, oh, you jump over a Fireball, I can just hit you very early in your counter hit, so then I land my jump in. Not in Street Fighter, dude. So in Street Fighter, like, ah, fuck, well, I landed this jump in fierce with, say, Ryu or Ken, and I'm like, well, I'm not going to be in range to actually hit another attack to a Fireball, so maybe I just got to do the sweep. Or maybe I just got to do a faraway hit to a DP. I'm not in range to actually hit a combo. This is like another layer of the game because there is not a supposedly complicated element to the game, right? So that's an example of how being complicated is not necessarily, whatever. I hope you guys get what I'm saying. So again, characters get up technically different in some ways because of the hurt boxes and Guilty Gear. People complain like, oh, we don't want a character to it fucks up with the wake up timing. You know what I mean? Characters have a different wake up timing, right? Do you realize that makes the game interesting, right? And I think that Jimmy's and Timmy's and all these people, maybe they don't like that because so many people that are not actually good at video games that only can read frame data. Like, oh, it's like, oh fuck, I read this frame data. Here's my trap. If I sweep the guy and I do this and I blah blah, they have to get up into this and it's gonna give me this exact amount of frame data or frame advantage. And they're like, oh fuck, wait, that doesn't work the same way for the versus this character. Like, what the fuck? My math can't fucking. Why the fuck do I have to learn a new math problem? I learned the one math problem that's supposed to make me good at the game. That's not fucking fair. Like, do you realize how fucking ridiculous that is? Like, the game, that's like another version of the Timmy or the math, or the Timmy or the Jimmy, all these kind of shit, dude. Like, fighting games aren't a math problem, dude. I'm sorry, a fighting game is not a math problem. I know they're trying to make it a math problem, but it's fucking not, dude. It's like you're trying to have a computer play the game for you, dude. Like, you learned a math problem. You read the cliff notes of the match, so you think you're good at the game. That's not how a fighting game works, dude. So you get what I'm saying? It's like, oh, you learned this setup. Like, that's so Twitter culture and everything. Like, oh, I found this, and this is something ironic. People that want games to be simple, right? We want to tone down Guilty Gear. We don't want as complicated combos. We don't want to have to learn this kind of different combo for this character, blah, blah, blah. And it's like the irony of a community that is so horny to put out, I found this one combo that no one else has done, this one specific piece of tech that no one else has done. Let me put it on my Twitter. Give me all my likes. Shower me in your praise. But then you don't want the game to be complicated? Motherfucker, you want the game to be as complicated as possible because we know you're not good at the game. We know you want, so you need to find any chance, any sliver of there being one obscure thing for you to find. You fucking need that, motherfucker, because we know you're not actually creative, dude, right? So you don't actually want the game to be more simple, dude. Trust me, right? And again, people forget how many cool things there are because Guilty Gear, when you actually do find little simple different things. Think about Guilty Gear, the tech that I've showed that, when a character blocks a different, even with proximity blocking in Guilty Gear, right? You can change your block animation, right? And I've showed setups. You block a Kai Big Fireball, you FRC it and you air dash in and you whiff a specific normal, the character will go into a different block animation in proximity blocking that then allows a hit to be hit. And people be like, oh, that's too complicated. Who cares? It's like, motherfucker, all you can do is post one combo on Twitter. You want that kind of shit because we know you're not fucking good at the game. We know you're not going to win any fucking tournament, dude. So you better pray that shit like that is in the game because most of you people do absolutely fucking nothing. You don't want to take away this shit because not only, again, we know you want your clout on Twitter for anything how fucking random it is because we know you're not fucking winning a tournament because you're not any good in the first place, right? You want this kind of shit, dude. And some of the shit that people want to get rid of the game is the only thing that's actually different about Guilty Gear. Because again, on some basic level, Guilty Gear is actually a very simple game. Because it's a game that was given thought, a lot of good thought too, right? A lot of good thought was in. Again, I'm not saying forward punches are bad or backdashes are bad, but these were good wills given to the player to make the game easier to get into. You know what I mean? Again, I know there's FD. I know there's FRC. And we know you want to fucking FRC every button. And the hypocrisy and the irony of a community that hates auto combos, which I don't like auto combos either, but that is one button. But you want an FRC button, you want a wave dash button, an FD button, a burst button, all this. You're making the game one button, motherfucker. You're fucking trying to fucking cheat already. You know what I mean? And the community's like, oh no, the programmers wanted this in the game. So you could use it. Motherfucker, we've already established when all these games have been made on console, even though people say, oh, arcade culture's dying, you know what I mean? So now it's console. Well, we've already established, even after our arcade culture is pretty much dead now, and console culture is much more popular, when the games have come out on the console first and then the arcade has not had more buttons for you to button map. Your argument is invalid. The developers did not want you to button map every single button. You've lost. Your argument is done. I don't care if you have a subjective argument that you think this is more skillful than that, whatever. You're a fucking idiot. I already know that. That's subjective. But you can say you're subjective. I think this is more skillful. This is less skillful. Okay, I got it, right? But it is totally objective that you trying to say that the developers want you to button map every single button, you've been proven wrong. Because anytime there has been a console game and it's come out to the arcade, The arcade version of fucking Super Street Fighter, like Street Fighter 5, these games came out after they came out of console. They don't have fucking 10 buttons on their controller for you to button map every single goddamn button, you fucking idiot. You're a fucking, just get out of here, Timmy. Someone roll your fucking wheelchair down the fucking road, dude, and post it on YouTube, dude. Anyway, you're a fucking idiot, dude. That's no, just stop, right? So again, Guilty Gear, and like, again, FRCs. You want to get rid of FRCs because you think it takes timing? These are the things that make Guilty Gear interesting, dude. You're taking away the things that actually take skill in Guilty Gear. Because again, at the end of the day, people are just going to complain because they're not fucking winning, dude. Right? So then the irony of we know you're not good at the game, so you're going to complain about it. So now you want it to be less complicated? It's going to be even harder for you to find shit, dude. Like, do you get that? And YRC, and one of the reasons I say Guilty Gear was not made well in an XR is because, again, and even I said this before, AC+R is when it started becoming anime game in a negative way, right? We look at a game and we can say like, oh, it's an anime game. Around XR, as much as, or not XR, AC+R, it started to feel like it's becoming an anime game, right? Man, it's like every character kind of like, you're trying to wake up. It's like, it's an anime game. You're waking up into bullshit, right? Like back in the day, Guilty Gear was so unique, right? But now, especially then in XR, it becomes like, oh, it's an anime game. Like, what is this character? Like, oh, Jimmy's like, oh, dude, there's this new character. And man, I'm like, what does the new character do, Jimmy? It's like, oh, he knocks you down into a big fireball. And then you got to block his mix up. And he's like, wow, huh. All right, Jimmy. What about this other new character? What do they do? It's like, oh, dude, well, you're not going to believe it. They knock you down into a big fireball and they put shit all over the screen and you got to block it. And it's like, oh, huh, okay, what about this other new character in XR? Yeah, dude, you're not going to believe it. They have this move where they knock you down into a bunch of bullshit and you got to block it. And it's like, huh, that's what an anime game is nowadays, right? And I'm not of the opinion that XR it is like, again, Guilty Gear is still, it's still Guilty Gear. I appreciate Guilty Gear, you know what I mean? The Daisuke guy, he's done a lot, you know what I mean? The dude's a genius, right? But I'm not of the opinion that XR is a game that is designed to that level anymore. And YRC is no. YRC is not a well-designed mechanic. YRC is a completely bullshit mechanic, right? I'm gonna be honest, let me put this, like, YRC, I think it's fucking awesome. If you go with it on the idea that, oh, you can freeze the game now when you, because you at first you're like, oh, it's an FRC that freezes the game. You're like, wow, that's fucking really cool and really awesome. You can do it from everything, but then you're like, oh, but wait a second, it doesn't take timing, right? It's like super easy to do. And you're like, oh, so it doesn't take time, and you're like, yeah, anyone can do it, dude. And it's like, okay, and then you wonder why the most. Here's why you can totally say it's a badly designed because they put in specific characters can't YRC moves. Do you realize that how bad of a game design YRC is when you cannot YRC your DPs? Do you know why that's stupid? Because you have put in rules into the game, and then you have said certain characters are not allowed to use the rules. That is fucking terrible game design, and they should be fucking ashamed for that, dude. I know this idea like, man, well, we don't want, DPs are too good. You know what I mean? Like, so we don't want a character to be a DP and then FRC or YRC and then they're safe. You know what I mean? Like, do you realize it's like there were FRC DPs and XR or not XR, AC+R, whatever all this stuff. You know what I mean? There are FRC DPs in other games, right? Like, but you know what? They took away YRC because like, oh, well, you can freeze the game. And like, well, we don't want this, even though it's a rule that every other character can use. We're afraid that people might complain about it, so we're not going to do it. Why don't you just make YRCs actually take timing, right? Is that was the problem that you like? Oh, it's too easy to do, so we can't have you be able to do it with these moves. That's absolutely fucking terrible game design. And maybe you think it's subjectively good. Maybe you think it's subjective. Maybe you hate DP characters. That's your subjective opinion. Bobby Brown it. That's your prerogative. It's my provocative. Man, I'm not old enough to remember the song, I guess, but whatever, dude. Bobby Brown it, dude. Boner up your butthole, dude. I don't fucking know, dude. But it can be subjective if you think that's good. If you think DP characters are stupid, who knows? Who knows what the fuck you're playing? Maybe you only fucking jack off to lolly characters or play with other characters. I don't know. But objectively speaking, that is absolutely fucking terrible game design. To design a game, give it to the player, tell you all the Jim's like, hey, here's my game. I made this game. here it is. Here's all the rules for the character. And you're playing like, oh fuck. And then he's like, well, the rule doesn't apply to that character if you do that move. And you're like, Jimmy, what the fuck? You're telling me this rule that exists for everything else in the game does not exist for these characters if they do that one specific move. You're like, yeah, yeah. Jimmy's like, yeah, because I don't like that. That is god awful fucking game design, and they should be fucking ashamed of themselves for that. That is object. I don't know how you can even say that's not objectively bad. To make a rule in a game that everyone else gets to play by, but then this one character or these two characters, whatever, can't actually use the rule is fucking stupid, and they should be ashamed of themselves for that. And whatever, dude. I don't care how cool it is that YRC slows down time. I agree, it's cool. I subjectively agree. Maybe I'm sure there's some people that probably don't think it's cool that it slows down time. I think it looks pretty neat, but objectively speaking, that's fucking terrible game design. So anyway, this video is really long, dude, but that's one of my rants. Yeah, so Guilty Gear, I could keep going about game theory, right? You know what I mean? But I like video games, but I know a lot of you motherfuckers can't actually talk intelligently about a game. So it feels kind of like I'm talking on deaf ears, but in the end.